Hello and welcome to this webinar. Today's webinar is focusing on health experiences of LGBTQ plus people of colour. This is the last in our series of talks and events to mark Black History Month this October at Cambridge University Hospitals. This webinar is also being recorded, and the purpose of these events are to educate as well as celebrate. I'm Monica Jacko, Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion for Workforce, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest speaker from Beatle Health, Eshi Kiyama Zuri, pronouns they, them. They are an activist, doula, and the new reproductive health lead for Beatle Health. Eshi offers free and low-cost emergency doula support for people who otherwise would not have access to it, offering specialist support for people with complex marginalisations and life situations. Eshi is the founder of Co-Care Project UK Mutual Aid, the co-founder of the Anima Print, a new Black activist-led micro-publishing project, and co-organiser at the Black Print Bookshop in the Gambia, and many more. They are here today to represent and talk about Beatle Health, which is a public health charity dedicated to promoting health, well-being and equality for LGBTQ plus communities of colour. They do this through evidence-based resource development and signposting of culturally safe support services throughout the UK. Beginning as an Instagram page, Beatle Health was born out of a desire to share the facts and statistics about the health experiences of LGBTQ plus people of colour. Through surveying the community, it became apparent to Beatle Health that what was missing was evidence-based resources that promoted health and well-being. They wanted to stand in place of that gap, and thus Beatle Health began. The three key areas they focus on are sexual and reproductive health, mental health and well-being, chronic conditions management. They have a growing team of health practitioners and educators who develop resources for each of these focused areas. Eshi will talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. So without further ado, over to you, Eshi.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to do a quite quick presentation as I know it's your lunch breaks, and yeah, we're going to go through a little bit about Black Beatle Health, who we are, what it is that we do and why we do it. Throw in a few statistics there to show why charities such as Black Beatle Health are so needed in the current state of healthcare at the moment in the UK. And yes, there'll be some time at the end for some questions, but please do feel free to pop your questions into the chat if they come up whilst I'm talking, so that you remember them by the end. I unfortunately can't see the chat at the moment as I've got my slides up, so I'm not going to be able to respond to them through the session, but I will try and get back to as many questions as possible at the end. So let me get started. So you had a little information about myself. Yes, I'm Eshi Kiyama Zuri. These are some of the projects that I am involved with. I recently have joined as the Reproductive Justice Project Lead for Black Beatle Health. This was due to my interactions with Black Beatle Health. I had seen them on Instagram. I was interviewed actually by them for their first magazine, and I was in awe of the work that they were doing, and how caring and informative their resources that they put out were, and I wanted to jump in and get involved. So who are Black Beatle Health? Black Beatle Health's expert-lived, experience-run community public health organisation and registered charity. The reason why Black Beatle Health is a registered charity rather than being just a community project is so that it can have the reach to be able to come into spaces like this today to be able to talk to you about the work that Black Beatle Health and other organisations and community groups who may not otherwise be able to come and take spaces like this do. So our mission is to promote health through evidence-based, peer-reviewed resource development. This is incredibly important to Black Beatle Health, that this is not just solely based on lived experience. We do value lived experience as imperative to providing appropriate support and care to marginalised groups. You are always going to be able to speak better on experiences that directly affect you rather than speak for other people who may have those experiences that you do not have. But we do also find it important that we are held accountable to the information, the resources, the research, the stuff that we put out, and we do that through peer review, through linking up with many different projects, many different organisations, different branches of the NHS, and allowing them to come in and review our work as well. And that way we have a sharing of information where we're able to share the information that we have out, and we're able to receive feedback and further information back in. So it is a cycle. We are intentional about our fight against racism, stigma, and misinformation that negatively affect the health outcomes and experiences of those in our communities. And what we mean by being intentional is that this is not an accident. We are actively, intentionally, every single day waking up and deciding to do something about what we think is important. It can be quite difficult to understand intentionality. This is something that I have actually taught as sections of cultural competency workshops, for instance, with different branches of the NHS before, about the difference between being just an ally and being an intentional ally. And that even as somebody with those lived experiences and shared marginalizations, we do still need to be an ally to other people within our groups and other people beyond that, and we want to be intentional allies. So we want to make sure that everything that we are doing, we are thinking about, we are caring about, and we are choosing to do, rather than just hoping that we do or assuming that we do. So the focus of our work, we love this little chart, this little why can I not think of the word now? The circles. We love these circles at Black Beatle Health, and we like to say that we sit right in the intersection in the middle between health, race, gender, and sexuality. And right in the middle, bang, that is Black Beatle Health, and that is who we focus our work on. And because we focus our work in such a small intersection of these three areas, it means that we're able to support those who are most marginalized out of those groups, and therefore that allows automatically the support for others who are less marginalized in those groups. So we always like to say that we focus right in the middle, in the most difficult parts, the most marginalized parts, the most least supported parts, and because of that, the support for others then falls into place. So what are our goals? Addressing misinformation and disinformation, educating, signposting, empowering, and again, we've got the health, the race, the gender and sexuality. So we struggle a lot with the misinformation and disinformation, and I'm sure you all do as well as workers within the NHS, that it is so easy for somebody to just open up social media and create a post, and that post may not be accurate information. It may then get shared a ton. It may end up in all of these spaces where people haven't then gone and fact checked that information. And again, this is why we love our peer review model, so that we're not ever putting out misinformation or disinformation. We're able to check and review our work, but we also would open ourselves up to be able to safely and with care address other people's misinformation and disinformation too through our peer review model. We are educators, so you will find us in quite a lot of different spaces. There's quite a few of us on our team. I'm just the reproductive health lead. There is a sexual health lead. There is a chronic illness health lead. There are many, many different people within Black Beatle Health, and we do like to try and get about as much as possible. So you may find us at Pride events throughout the year, at community spaces, within the NHS doing talks like this, providing training at different conferences. And yes, we do try and take as many of our resources as possible as we can into these spaces to constantly be educating. And I will say we are always asked questions no matter where we are. So yeah, we love to talk. We also have signposting on our website. I'll show some of that at the end. But yeah, we have some signposting on our website where we work with some different organisations and groups as well to ensure that we are able to reach as many people as possible with our signposting, but also include as many projects and resources across the entire of the UK for people to be able to find easily when they need specific information. And we try to empower ourselves and our communities as much as possible. So we like to think that with these goals, they are long-term goals, they are sustainable goals, and it's important for us that we're continuing to do these beyond the trend, or kind of beyond the equality funding, that we are dedicated to doing this and helping put systems in place within organizations, charities, the NHS, etc., where you're also able to continue these processes on even after you've gone through your kind of mandatory EDI training or other trainings. We want this to be sustainable long-term work that again goes back to intentionality, that people are being very intentional about every day, that we are not just seeing this as a trend or a tick box exercise. We are here and we're here to stay, and we hope that you will join us on that journey. So these are some of the resources that we have on our website. So here we've got our Redefining Sexual Health Guide. This one, really, really great. Let me just bring them all up actually so we can see them all in one go. Here we go. So yes, we have a wealth of different resources and we continue to work on more and more and more. Here we have sexual and reproductive health and HIV resources. So we've got our sexual health guides, we've got HIV harm reduction guides. These ones up here, actually, the 6 that are kind of lumped together, I like to say that they're quite similar to the old school pamphlets in the NHS, you know, when you're in a waiting room or you're in the doctor's office and they hand you that pamphlet and it's like, here's some more information. This is our version of that. So you can print out these guides if you want to. They would be great to stock your waiting rooms, to stock your offices, to be able to hand out as you feel fit. They are also online as PDFs too, so you can just go and have a click through, share them via email, use them however you would like. But what I love about them is that they are informative, but they're also a bit fun. They're bright and colourful. They draw attention and they hold attention, but they have a ton of information inside them, and they are made with LGBTQIA+, Black people and people of colour in mind. So we can see that even just from looking on here, that the use of certain skin colours in the graphics is something which Black people and people of colour often do not find inclusive guides through the NHS and elsewhere, that of illustrations that look like them. You know, we often are an afterthought, a diversity afterthought, or just not the people that the guides are made for at all. We're not included in the thought process when guides and resources are made. So we try to flip that narrative and create the guides for us first. so that we can be centered and we can be able to see stuff that is culturally and specifically appropriate to ourselves. So definitely do please have a look at those guides there. As you can see as well, like talking about skin tone and inclusivity, we have here our guide. We've got syphilis and hepatitis A shown on the screen here. And if you have a quick look, I'm not sure quite how big it is on your screen, if you can see, but again, we're using darker skin tones to show the images here so that people with darker skin tones are able to identify what certain things might look like on their skin types. And as a bit of a side note, I have actually seen quite a few doctors, nurses on TikTok, on Instagram, setting up accounts which specifically show that as well, which are great. And they show side-by-side comparisons of what certain illnesses, what certain infectious diseases, what certain other illnesses, chronic illnesses, etc., look like on different skin tones, so you are able to correctly identify when you might have something, or someone you know might have something. And I think that it's such a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but it makes such a big impact. And our guides are always something that we receive very, very positive feedback on. That yes, people for the first time often are seeing themselves represented in a guide, are not able to use something like the guide to correctly to get the correct healthcare support that they need. So we also have on the top our podcast, which is amazing. I'm not actually sure how many episodes we're on now, but we're definitely on the second season. So there's plenty of episodes for you to be able to go and listen to, pop it on in the background whilst you're doing stuff. And the amazing Ellis, who is our social media person, runs that and is absolutely amazing. So we have guests on the podcast, some people who are speaking from lived experience in healthcare, some people who are speaking from professional experience, and of course there will be some who are overlapping the both, but we also share some like statistics, updates, news, information, stuff that has been going on within healthcare as well. And the same within our magazines. So we have the Beatle feed here, the two issues of the magazine that we've got out so far. And again, you can read this online, you can share it about, you can print it off if you want to. It's great. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in the first Beatle feed, but yeah, please do go read my interview over there as well. And yeah, this has, absolutely tons of resources in sexual reproductive health guides, information, interviews, recommendations. So yeah, please do have a little look at those too. So we also have our mental health and chronic illness guides, and we've got over here mental health, LGBTQ plus, people of colour, chronic illnesses and conditions, and again the set of guides that I love with the bright colours, perfect for printing out and sharing about. And I do really urge that people actually do go and have a look at these and make comparisons between the way that we style our guides, the colours that we use, the diversity in skin tones that we use, the diversity in couple types or in appearance that we use, and compare them to some of the other guides that you might see within the NHS, and just make some of those comparisons yourself as to whether you think the guides that are commonly used are actually inclusive enough, and maybe they are, but maybe they're not. And so what then can you do as an ally, as an intentional ally, to then try and make some of those changes to ensure that they are as inclusive as possible? We've also again got the LGBTQ plus, Black people and people of colour signposting, and yes, please do have a look on the website for all the signposting stuff that we have. Jumped ahead. So like I said, we like to get about. We are as many places as we can be. These are some of the amazing events that we have been to recently. And yes, we find it important to be leading voices in healthcare settings and conferences, but also to meet our community where they are at and support grassroots. So what I mean by that is you'll see here we have the United Nations Roundtable on Discrimination and Violence. You know, very, very important, very prestigious. But then also we love to be at our local Pride events too. We love to be at Reproductive Justice Initiative Roundtable events, which is a grassroots project set up actually by a doctor. And yeah, we love to be at as many of these events as possible. Meeting the community where they are doesn't necessarily mean that where we will be going to will be a healthcare related event. It may be a party, it may be a talk about something else that is relevant to LGBTQIA plus Black people and people of colour, but sometimes those are the spaces that we need to be in, and those are the spaces that we should make sure that we're represented in. We have resources and information available for people, because sometimes people don't know how to come and find us. And I think that's the problem with healthcare in general, is that yes, we all know how to get in touch with the NHS, get in touch with our doctors, get in touch, you know, call 999, 111, but often we don't really see the presence of healthcare within our communities day to day, especially as LGBTQIA plus Black people and people of colour. We're not necessarily going into our community spaces and seeing the same resources that you might find in, say, more average white working class middle class community space, because quite often we are an afterthought, we're not included, and people are not trying to access, like trying to give us access to the resources that are available elsewhere, or may not think that we need it. And sometimes we do need additional and quite specific support, and that isn't provided. So we do try and make sure that we go and meet people everywhere and anywhere. Okay, so this is going a bit into the experiences of healthcare now for LGBTQIA plus people, Black people and people of colour. So I'm not sure how many of you will actually know some of these statistics. I'm not sure whether this will have come up in some of your trainings before, or if some of you have taken some initiative to go and have a look at these statistics. But I will say that there are quite a lot of statistics out there which are quite easy to find. And again, to be an intentional ally, we do sometimes have to just take a bit of our own time, or try and put it into your work time if you can, but we have to sometimes take our own initiative to go and look for up-to-date research, what is kind of happening and going on in different marginalized communities, so that you're able to offer the best support that you can for people who you are supporting. So here we have 1 in 5 Black people, and I would also just like to add as well, by the way, that the language that is being used in these snippets, they're not the language that we use at Black Beatle Health. However, this is the language which is used in the studies, so we felt that it was important to maintain that language and not change it, as sometimes changing the language may mean changing the group of people who were supported, or how people were identifying when they were asked these questions. And so although if we were putting this into Black Beatle Health resources, we would use slightly different language. When I'm explaining this word for word, it has to be maintained. So 1 in 5 Black and minority ethnic LGBT people have experienced unequal treatment from healthcare staff because they are LGBT, compared to 1 in 8 LGBT people overall. This comes from a number of different reasons. You know, I'm sure that something that will have come up in some of the training that you would have had, I hope, will be that there is underlying institutional racism within the NHS. That's how the NHS was set up. It is kind of included in the day-to-day of the NHS, whether you feel like you intentionally participate in that or not, or you try to intentionally not participate in that, there are still just certain ways that treatment is done, certain ways the pathways work, the ways that people, like the assumptions, you know, for instance, the assumption that Black people have thicker skin or need less medication, less pain medication than white people, or the assumption that Asian women are hysterical in comparison to white women. You know, these are just assumptions which are kind of built into the institutional structure of the NHS and need to constantly be called out and challenged. But sometimes you can participate in those thoughts without knowing that you are participating in them, just because they are institutionally within the NHS. So that can be one of the reasons why Black and minority ethnic people, LGBT people, experience unequal treatment, with them being Black people and people of colour, and then on top of that also being LGBTQIA+. That can mean that then there is two different oppressions which can be connected, which they are experiencing, which mean that their experience is going to be worse than a white LGBTQIA+ person. So yeah, the most common negative experience cited are inappropriate questions and curiosity, specific needs being ignored or not taken into account, avoiding treatment services for fear of discrimination. So yeah, the highest rates of HIV transmission continue to be seen in gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men, as well as across Black African people in the UK. And there are some great resources, actually. The BASH, British Association for Sexual Health and HIV, have put together, which outlines some of those statistics as well. I think I might have some BASH statistics in my next slide, actually. But yeah, definitely do go and have a little look at those too. But just to talk on this a little bit more, there is a need for gender neutral and inclusive language and resources that are also specific to Black people and people of colour and LGBTQIA+ communities within the NHS. Sometimes it's not just good enough to say, okay, I'm going to, you know, create more inclusivity by just changing a few words. Because although that can make a bit of a change for some people, it still isn't necessarily reaching the people who need to be reached. And that's what I spoke a little bit about just now, that if you change the wording, a few of your resources within the NHS, but nobody knows that you've done that, or those resources in other ways are still not appropriate for Black people and people of colour or LGBTQIA+ people in general, then the impact isn't really received as well as if you actually just start straight from the beginning with some things. And so I think that's what's so important to note, that we can think that we're making these little changes, but if nobody is seeing it, nobody is hearing it, and it isn't reaching people at all, then who are those changes for? You know, and this is why it's so important that we listen to people with a lived experience, and we invite people in with lived experience who are able to peer review to come in and tell you whether those changes are going to make the impact that they need to make or not. So, you know, just for instance, these are some areas that have come up when we've been doing Black Beatle Health research as to what the NHS is lacking. And some of that can be, you know, again, the gender neutral and inclusive language, but also how certain, for instance, sexual health conditions manifest on people who have gone through genital changes or surgery, because we often don't see those kinds of images, we don't see that kind of information. Or in general, how things affect people who have bodies that are considered different to cisgender, heterosexual, white, slim, able-bodied norms. We do very often only see things on certain body types. And when we actually, as people who have all different kinds of body types, are then trying to figure out whether that is appropriate for us, that is something that we can learn from, this is something which is supportive for us or not, we often feel like we can't, and then we are excluded from those supports and services. Yeah, there are a ton of different things around how specifically trans and non-binary inclusivity is needed more in the NHS, and we just do not have any resources at all about how certain health conditions may also how people who are on certain hormones, for instance, hormone replacement treatments, or who may not be, how certain health conditions may manifest slightly differently in them compared to people who are not on hormone replacement therapies. There are many, many different questions which we constantly get asked as Black Beatle Health, and we are having to create the resources on because the resources just do not exist at the moment. And it is important that resources that are created are shared in a neutral and non-negative way, which speaks only to the medical information and support that somebody may need. And because some people who do feel like maybe they are included in fringe information, such as especially we see quite a bit around sexual health, focusing on LGBTQIA plus inclusivity, which is important for sure, but also can then make people feel like they are a risk, or they can feel like they are deviating from the norm. And this is also very important that, yeah, when we are talking about inclusive resources, that it is important to be factual, but to not make anybody feel like they are being treated differently just because they're at a different start point to somebody else, just because they are LGBTQIA plus or Black person or person of color. So yeah, fear tactic, medical information or outdated or misinformation is, yeah, very, very important that we challenge that, as unfortunately we do see quite a lot of that within healthcare. Yes, especially at the moment for trans and non-binary people, I would say. So let me go on to the next slide. I'm trying to whiz through this as fast as possible, so I'm really sorry if there are certain things that you need a bit more clarification on. Please do pop that into the chat and I'll try and come back to it. I have a lot that I want to get through, and I'm trying to pick and choose what I'm saying. So here we've got the 2017 National LGBT Survey, which describes the situation where LGBT communities face discrimination, feel that their needs were not being met, and this is kind of what I was just saying before. And I will say as well that there is such a thing as second-hand discrimination too. So while somebody who is a service user, who is coming into the NHS, accessing the NHS services, may not be discriminated against one-on-one. You know, you may ask their pronouns when you meet them, you may address them by the correct name with the correct pronunciation. You know, you may do all of the things that you are trying to do to make this person as welcomed and included as possible, but there can be secondhand discrimination where this person accessing the service may know that internally, though, there are people who disagree with who they are as a person, or maybe treating other members of staff badly, or the energy, the vibe within the place is quite oppressive. And this can happen quite a lot, actually, as trans and non-binary people, LGBTQI plus people in general, Black people and people of color, do tend to talk quite a lot. We tend to share quite a lot of information about where we find inclusive, where we don't find inclusive. So it may be a case of, you know, warning somebody that the doctor's office that you're about to go to, you have overheard them using transphobic language or racist language, and you're going to warn that, and that becomes something which is kind of known within the community. And so this is the second-hand discrimination, where people may not want to come and access those services, knowing that internally or behind closed doors they may be judged, discriminated against, or other people like them are being judged and discriminated against. So we have quite a lot of these resources on our website as well. We've got our Inside Out, which is perspectives on health, wellbeing and equality for raciosexual minority individuals in the UK. I'm not going to run through this right now because it's a bit long, but we have got all of this stuff available for you to have a flick through online. And I really do hope that you take the initiative to go and have a look at these resources too. Some of the other resources I would suggest, I mean, as a doula, I work with people who are going through the perinatal phase of their life. And I work with abuela doulas who trained me as a doula. They're amazing. They have a ton of great resources on inclusivity in perinatal healthcare for Black people. They are the Black Doula Network in the UK. You have 5 times more focus on the perinatal mortality statistics. So we've just had the Embrace report come out, I think a week ago maybe, so October 2023. And in the Embrace report, it has shown that the statistics for Black and people of color, Black people and people of color perinatal mortality rate has not changed that much since the previous Embrace report. So it was 4 to 5 times more likely for Black people specifically to die during their perinatal period, and now I think it is still 4 times more likely. So there is not much change there at all. 5 times more put out great research project as well, so have a little look at that. And birthrights as well have put out some information, I think either earlier this year or last year. And the birthrights one I really do like as well, because they have been inclusive with gender and sexuality, as well as focusing on Black people and people of colour. So that's the intersection there where Black Beatle Health work as well. So please do check those out, especially if you work within perinatal services. But in general, it is still very good information to have. So we use the term raciosexual minority to mean individuals who are from Black or racial/ethnic minority backgrounds, whose identities also intersect with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or gender non-conforming identities. So yeah, we try to be as intentional with our language as possible. And this is one of the terms that you will see if you're having a look at Black Beatle Health resources online. So we've got our HEAT program, which is a cultural safety development tool. This is actually really, really interesting, and something that I do recommend the services bring in. We can come in, Black Beatle Health can come in and run HEAT training program with you. We did our trial run last year, and it included people from BASH, who I spoke about before, Oxford University Hospitals, many different university hospitals across the country. And this is where we did our peer review on quite a large scale. So this is very, very well attended, very, very well enjoyed. And I think that it conveys a lot of information in quite a short amount of time. We actually have one coming up. So we've got one on the 16th and 17th of November, and there are tickets still available. So if you have a little look on Black Beatle Health website, it will take you through to our Ticketmaster, where you can purchase your tickets. It's 2 days in Manchester at the Holiday Inn, and the modules that we are doing will be LGBT and BPOC terms, the role of racism, decolonizing the colonized, addressing health disparities, developing an evidence-based approach, the power of cultural capital, and health outcomes. So it's very hefty, it's very meaty, there is a lot to learn, but it will be presented in a way which will be quite interactive as well. So we really hope that some of you would like to join us on that journey. This was just a little bit about our signposting map that we have with Live Through This. So yeah, definitely have a little look on our website. And this is our call for support. So a reason to invest in Black Beatle Health, because we invest in our community, but we need you to invest in us so that we can provide as much support and resources as possible. We've got our donor box on there, but even just going on our website and having a little look through is good as well. And that's it for me. So yeah, that's Black Beetle Health. I'm gonna unshare my screen now.
Thank you ever so much, Eshi. Really informative session. And I like the word, the phrase you used about being an intentional ally. I'm interested in your health equity advocacy training program, and the Oxford Hospitals Trust have been involved. And I'd like to find out a few more about which other hospitals have got involved. And we've been using the NHS Rainbow Badge assessment process to assess how LGBT inclusive we are. But so thank you. Are there any questions that colleagues would like to ask, be it in the chat box or in the Q&A? While colleagues are waiting, I just wanted to ask you, Eshi, are you collaborating? With the Race and Health Observatory, with Habib Natvi, do you link him with them and their research for their peer review?
That's not within my area, I'm afraid, so I actually don't know. That would have to be a question that I would have to ask to whoever that is more appropriate for within Black Beetle Health. But I would assume so, as at the moment I know we have like a mountain of collaborations on at the moment. But yeah, I'm specifically reproductive health and at the moment quite new, so I'm sorry I can't answer that.
No worries at all. And where is your funding from? You mentioned a number of sources. Do you get some? Where are your funding sources as a charity?
Yeah, so we apply for funding pots, the same as pretty much most charities. I think at the moment we have just had a large chunk of funding from the Baobab Fund, which has been really, really great. They quite specifically fund projects, charities that are working within like racial inclusion. And yeah, I think that they do great work. We provide some of our services paid as well, so that comes back in. And then we do also focus on crowdfunding within our community to provide some of the resources that are more community specific. And I do think it's very important actually to note that charities do not have like unlimited funding. It is really difficult for us to receive funds. And so a lot of the time we are providing these services and we are donating our own time and resources for free. We don't always get covered for everything that we do. So where you are able to, if you can financially support a charity, please do try to, even if it is, just setting up a little direct debit for £1 or £5 or something a month, or giving when people put out these call outs on social media, because yeah, it is increasingly harder and harder, especially when we find that the more you're focusing on a specific group of people, the more you're focusing on people who are multiply marginalized, the needs of people who are multiply marginalized, the less funding is available to you.
Thank you. And I put some comments in the chat that I'd like us to use some of your materials, perhaps in our occupational health clinics and our other outpatient clinics. But are there any comments or questions for Eshi? Lee. And then...
First off, thank you for all the work that you do and all the Black Beetle does. It's really great to hear, and I'm very interested to learn more, so I'll be looking up all the resources after this. From my background within EDI and working with other organisations as well, I think one of the terms that is used quite often for the people you work with and essentially for as well is hard to reach. Now, I know that's not true. They're not hard to reach, just how they're being approached. Is there specific language that you and Black Beetle would use instead of that to help kind of almost correct that language?
That's an interesting one, actually, for sure. Yeah, I really do dislike the hard to reach terminology. I can't think off the top of my head of what the specific term we would use in comparison would be. But I do think that sometimes it's not just about changing the language as well, like the specific wording. It's about actually changing the way we are approaching that we're assuming that there are people who are hard to reach, and how instead, if we, you know, try and flip the way that we are offering our support and services instead, we may not need to actually use certain terminology at all. And I think this is one of the problems where, you know, it's very difficult in the NHS because there is not so much that you all can do a lot of times, because, you know, you are also dependent on the NHS as a whole, but there are certain things that you will be able to do yourself, that you have autonomy within the services that you provide to be able to change and to say, okay, maybe it is even as simple as, how diverse are the spaces that you're working in? Like, who are you hiring within those spaces? Because believe me, when spaces are more diverse, you are going to reach a more diverse group of people automatically.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Eshi. I think the term "seldom heard" is a term that could be used, because yes, it's whose voices aren't you hearing? And David, question for, ask far away.
Great, thank you so much for that canter through your work and through this context, through the reality of unfortunately reality of life, and that overlapping diagram at the beginning of the circles where you work in the joined areas is really impressive. Sorry, I'm bumbling along. My question is, you know, Black History Month, we often talk about two things. We celebrate all the positive aspects of diversity and inclusion, and we call out great role models and great stories and the richness of our communities, and we also call out the shaming stuff, the different experiences, the different outcomes, in your case different health outcomes for people. I suppose getting that balance right, you seem quite, despite probably experiencing and seeing such, you know, incredible different experiences and outcomes for people, you're presenting a very positive. Can you tell us how you balance those two in your world, what you see and what you, because it's not all joy and it's not all tragedy. So do you get my feeling? Do you get my question?
Yeah, I think so. I think it can be very difficult to balance it, and I think it's quite an interesting point that you bring up, in that sometimes we are forced to present a more positive, like, representation of what everything is, because we assume that will get better responses. Quite honestly, we also don't necessarily want to always show all of the bad, because sometimes that can elicit responses which aren't thoroughly genuine. Sometimes people can feel bad in the moment when they hear something bad, but that doesn't then necessarily lead to long-term change. And this, I can use like an example for when I was doing training with Greater Manchester NHS Trust, actually, where we were talking about something which was quite triggering, you know, and a load of them were just saying, like, actually, I'm not sure I want to hear this right now. And we're like, okay, you know what, that's actually like very valid. And sometimes we don't want to hear these things all the time, and some people do. I think we all respond quite differently to different, like, positive or negative information. However, yeah, there is a we are almost forced in a way to present more positively in comparison to negatively. I think we don't necessarily want to come across that we're always being a bummer, you know, we're not always being a downer, we're not always trying to show this negative stuff, because then people do think that we're trying to make you feel bad for hearing how bad it is for us, you know, we're trying to make you feel bad. And actually sometimes we just want to be quite honest about what the situation is like, and we're not able to do so. I do think as well that there is a problem anyway in general with Black History Month, in that there shouldn't just be 1 month in which we're having this information be shared. That this again goes into intentionality. This needs to be a longer term, like full-time intentional experience for people, that they are trying to unlearn the institutional racism within the NHS, the institutional transphobia, the institutional queerphobia within the NHS, and to be an intentional ally every single day. And sometimes when we're having to put that into just an hour in a day, it's not a full representation of everything that we're trying to put across. So yeah, I feel that was a bit rambly, but
No,
Thank you,
that was beautifully put, actually, and really thought provoking, about intentionality, about every year, and about getting the balance right. Are we forced to be positive about stuff which is in many cases horrific, but how do we engage? Thank you.
Yeah.
Alex has put a question: what are the common challenges LGBTQIA plus people of colour face when accessing maternity services? You mentioned the damning figures that haven't improved. I'm wondering what we should be considering to tackle that at CUH.
So this is a really big one, and this is actually like the area that I usually do work in. So first of all, the statistics that I've shared, the Embrace statistics, the statistics that we would see through birthrights, through times more, they are all gendered statistics. Those statistics are about Black women, Black cisgender women, and women of colour, in comparison to white women, white cisgender women. And so it is really important. I do try to make sure that people notice that, and when I share those statistics, in that when we know that Black cisgender women are being treated worse or have worse outcomes than white cisgender women, yet for people who might be Black birthing people who are maybe transgender, maybe non-binary, maybe lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, etc., right? They are going to have even worse outcomes. It just hasn't been researched, because they are not only experiencing the racism, they are also then experiencing the level of transphobia, of queerphobia on top of that. And because these services already are not supportive enough to people from racialized backgrounds, these services do not contain any resources at all, really, for people who are not cisgender or heterosexual. Then there are going to be additional complications that those people face. And I actually have just joined a research project with Oxford University, which is perinatal healthcare for trans and non-binary people. It is the first research project of its kind, and it is not even specific to Black people and people of colour. We are still, again, just almost an afterthought within the first ever research project for trans and non-binary people in perinatal healthcare in 2023. It is shocking, honestly. So one of the things I would say is go and read the birthrights, the 5 times more reports, but also be sure to try and find people who have lived experience of both marginalizations there, of being LGBTQIA+, of being Black people or people of colour, and try and find them to come in and give support and advice within these services, because they are the people who are going to know best what is and what isn't working. And I really don't like to paint such a bad image of perinatal services within the NHS. However, my personal experience, as well as my professional experience, is that there is a lot that needs to change within these areas. They are, at this point, almost not fit for purpose if there are so many people who are being harmed within those services. And that isn't me putting that onto you as individuals who work within those services, because midwives, doctors, obs, you are absolutely overworked, underfunded. You are doing the best that you can, but when you're working within a system that has these issues institutionally built into the system, and you are having to navigate that, no matter how much care you are trying to provide, no matter how intentional you are trying to be outside of that system, you still have to work within that system, and that system is what is harming the people who are accessing the services. So really, this does need a big overhaul, and it also needs a unity between these services across the country, really, to be able to say, actually, we do want to try and make these changes, but we can't do it as individual services. We have to do it as a whole, and you also have to understand that as people, we need certain things too to be able to provide appropriate services. And so these are not things that happen separately. I think that that's really important as well, that the NHS being underfunded, you all being overworked, is happening at the same time as people receiving poor services. And if you link those two causes together, it's going to be better for everybody, rather than people going on strike to try and get better wages but not addressing the services that are being provided, etc., etc. So,
and that's where collaboration is key, and our LGBT plus staff network is working with maternity service providers working on that. So thanks. Our time is really running out here, but I think simple things we can be doing is using the literature and the information leaflets that you shared, and Sharon's put in the chat, I really love the example of the literature you create. Seeing representation in such a simple way makes a huge difference, and so there's small steps we can be doing as well as the larger work, but collaboration and learning and having diversity in our workforce teams, is which you highlighted, is another part of that. So I think if there are no more questions, I think I'd just like to thank you ever so much, Eshi. We've recorded this session, so colleagues will be able to access it on Connect after today. But thank you very much for colleagues for joining us today, and thank you for a really informative talk today. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I sign off, thank you so much for listening to me today. I know I've been quite rambly trying to condense everything all into a very short session, but also please do not let this be the end of this conversation. You have my email. Black Beatle Health is there. This is not just we pop in once and we are gone. Please do keep in touch with us, and feel free, even as individuals within the NHS, to come and chat to us if you have any questions, you need any additional support. That's what we're there for, and we would love to connect with you beyond this as well. So yeah, keep us updated on how you're getting on.
Fantastic. We know where to work. Yes, it's the start of a journey. We'll continue. I know wanting to link in with you. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, colleagues. Bye.